Mr. D sat in a large armchair. His belt was loosened, evening newspapers lay on his lap. He was peacefully puffing on his pipe, savoring life. Today, he had managed to sell 2 amulets and a bottle of love potion. His wife was bustling about in the kitchen, where delightful aromas wafted, and his pipe was smoking smoothly. With a satisfied sigh, Mr. D yawned and stretched. His 9-year-old son, Morton, scurried through the room, laden with books. "How's school going?" Mr. D called out. "Fine," the boy replied, slowing his steps but not stopping. "What's that you've got there?" Mr. D asked, gesturing toward the stack of books in his son's arms. "Oh, just some stuff on accounting," Morton mumbled, avoiding his father's gaze. He disappeared into his room. Mr. D shook his head. The boy had somehow gotten it into his head that he wanted to be an accountant. An asterisk accountant. No doubt, Morton was remarkably good with numbers. Still, this foolish notion had to be forgotten. A different, better fate awaited him. The doorbell rang. Mr. D tightened his belt, hastily threw on a shirt, and opened the door. Standing on the threshold was Miss Grebe, Morton's homeroom teacher. "Please, come in, Miss Grebe," D invited. "Can I offer you something?" "No time," Miss Grebe said, planting her hands on her hips and standing firm in the doorway. Her disheveled gray hair, narrow long-nosed face, and red, teary eyes made her look remarkably like a witch. And no wonder, she was a witch. "I need to talk about your son," the teacher declared. At that moment, Mrs. D emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "I hope he's not misbehaving," she said with concern. Miss Grebe gave a sinister snort. "Today, I gave the annual exam. Your son failed miserably." "Oh, heavens," Mrs. D wailed. "4th grade, springtime, maybe." "Spring has nothing to do with it," Miss Grebe cut her off. "Last week, I assigned the Great Spells of Quartus, Part 1. You know, as simple as it gets. He didn't learn a single one." Mr. D murmured. "In biology, no clue about basic magical herbs. None whatsoever. Unthinkable," Mr. D exclaimed. Miss Grebe let out a short, bitter laugh. "Worse still, he forgot the secret alphabet we studied in 3rd grade. Forgot the protective formula, forgot the names of the 99 lesser demons of the 3rd circle, forgot the little he knew about the geography of hell. But worst of all, he simply doesn't want to learn." Mr. and Mrs. D exchanged a silent glance. This was very serious. A bit of boyish carelessness was permitted, even encouraged, as it showed strength of character. But a child needed to know the basics if he ever hoped to become a true sorcerer. "Let me be blunt," Miss Grebe continued. "In the old days, I'd have expelled him without blinking. But there are so few of us now." Mr. D nodded sadly. Witchcraft had been declining for centuries. Old families were dying out, falling victim to demonic forces or turning to science. The fickle public had lost all interest in ancestral charms and curses. Now, only a handful preserved the ancient art, teaching it to children in places like Miss Grebe's private school. A sacred heritage and treasure. "To think, becoming an accountant," the teacher exclaimed. "I don't understand where he got this idea." She shot an accusing look at the father. "And I don't understand why this foolish nonsense wasn't crushed from the start." Mr. D felt his face flush. Yes, he was to blame. He shouldn't have brought home that toy abacus. And when he first caught Morton playing with double-entry bookkeeping, he should have burned the ledger. But who could have imagined an innocent prank would turn into an obsession? Mrs. D smoothed her apron and said, "Miss Grebe, we're counting on you." "What do you suggest?" "I've done all I can," the teacher replied. "The only option left is to summon Borbas, the demon of children." "Of course, that's your decision." "Oh, it's hardly that bad," Mr. D said quickly. "Summoning Borbas is a drastic measure." "I repeat, it's your call," Miss Grebe said. "Summon him or don't, but as things stand, your son will never become a sorcerer." She turned to leave. "Perhaps a cup of tea?" Mrs. D offered hastily. "No, I'm late for a witches' Sabbath in Cincinnati." Miss Grebe tossed back and vanished in a cloud of orange smoke. Mr. D waved away the smoke and closed the door. He muttered. "She could have at least scented it." "Old-fashioned," Mrs. D murmured. They stood silently by the door. Only now did Mr. D begin to grasp the gravity of the situation. It was hard to imagine that his son, his own flesh and blood, didn't want to continue the family tradition. It couldn't be. After dinner, Mr. D decided at last, I'll talk to him. Man to man, I'm sure we can avoid any demons. Good, Mrs. D said. I hope you can get through to him. She smiled, and her husband caught the familiar witchy glint in her eyes. Good heavens, the roast! Mrs. D suddenly exclaimed, the glint fading as she hurried back to the kitchen. Dinner was quiet. Morton knew the teacher had visited and ate as if feeling guilty, saying nothing. Mr. D cut his meat with a stern frown. Mrs. D didn't even try to make small talk. After swallowing his dessert, the boy slipped off to his room. Here we go, Mr. D said, finishing his coffee, wiping his mouth, and standing. Where's my amulet of persuasion? His wife thought for a moment, then went to the bookshelf. Here, she said, pulling it from a brightly colored book. I was using it as a bookmark. Mr. D pocketed the amulet, took a deep breath, and headed to his son's room. Morton sat at his desk, surrounded by a notebook filled with numbers and neat little notes, 6 sharply pointed pencils, an eraser, an abacus, and a toy calculator. A threatening stack of books loomed over the desk's edge. Money by Rimromer, Practical Banking by Johnson and Calhoun, Lectures for Tax Inspectors *, and a dozen others. Mr. D pushed aside some scattered clothes and made space on the bed. How's it going, son? He asked in the kindest tone he could muster. Great, Dad, Morton chirped. I got to the 4th chapter of * Fundamentals of Accounting *, answered all the questions. Son, D gently interrupted, I meant your schoolwork. Morton faltered, fidgeting with his feet on the floor. You know, not many boys these days get the chance to become a sorcerer. Yes, sir, I know, Morton said, then suddenly turned away and, in a high, breaking voice, blurted, but, Dad, I want to be an accountant. Really bad. Please, Dad? Mr. D shook his head. Our family, Morton, has always been known for its sorcerers. For 11 centuries, the D name has been renowned in supernatural circles. Morton kept staring out the window, shuffling his feet. You don't want to disappoint me, do you, boy? Mr. D gave a sad smile. You know, anyone can become an accountant. But only a select few can master the art of black magic. Morton turned from the window, picked up a pencil, tested its point with his finger, and twirled it in his hands. Come on, little man. Can't you study hard enough to make Miss Grebe happy? Morton shook his head. I want to be an accountant. Mr. D barely contained his anger. What was wrong with the amulet of persuasion? Had its spell weakened? He should have recharged it. Morton, he continued in a dry voice, I'm only a 3rd-degree adept. My parents were very poor, they couldn't send me to university. I know, the boy whispered. I want you to have everything I only dreamed of. Morton, you could become a 1st-degree adept. Mr. D shook his head thoughtfully. It'll be tough, but your mom and I have saved a bit, and we'll scrape together what's needed. Morton bit his lips and twirled the pencil. Son, a 1st-degree adept doesn't have to work in a shop. You could become a direct executor of the devil's will. A direct executor. So, what do you say, little man? For a moment, D thought his son was moved. Morton's lips parted, his eyes glistened suspiciously. Then the boy looked at his books, his little abacus, his toy calculator. I'll be an accountant, he said. We'll see about that, Mr. D shouted, his patience snapping. No, young man, you won't be an accountant, you'll be a sorcerer. What was good enough for your family is good enough for you. I swear by all that's cursed in this world. You'll remember my words. He stormed out of the room. As soon as the door slammed, Morton bent back over his books. Mr. and Mrs. D sat silently on the couch. Mrs. D was knitting, but her mind was elsewhere. Mr. D stared grimly at the worn living room carpet. We've spoiled him, Mr. D finally said. Our only hope is Borba's. Oh, no, Mrs. D cried, alarmed. Morton's still just a child. Do you want your son to be an accountant? Mr. D asked bitterly. Toiling over numbers instead of doing the devil's important work? Of course not, his wife replied. But Borbas, I know, I feel like a murderer myself. They fell silent. Then Mrs. D said, maybe Grandpa? He always loved the boy. Perhaps, Mr. D said thoughtfully. But is it worth disturbing him? After all, the old man's been dead for 3 years. I understand, but it's either that or Borbas. Mr. D agreed. It was unpleasant to disturb Grandpa Morton's rest, but resorting to Borbas was far worse. Mr. D decided to begin preparations to summon his father at once. He mixed henbane, ground unicorn horn, hemlock, and added a piece of dragon's tooth, placing it all on the carpet. Where's my magic wand? He asked his wife. I stuck it in the bag with your golf clubs, she replied. Mr. D retrieved the wand and waved it over the mixture. He muttered the 3 words of release and loudly called his father's name. A wisp of smoke rose from the carpet. Hello, Grandpa, Mrs. D said with a bow. Sorry to disturb you, Dad, Mr. D began. The thing is, my son, your grandson, refuses to become a sorcerer. He wants to be an accountant. The wisp of smoke trembled, then straightened and formed a sign in the old tongue. Yes, Mr. D replied. We've tried persuading him. He's unshakable. The smoke quivered again and formed another sign. I think that's best, Mr. D agreed. If we scare him half to death, he'll forget his accounting nonsense for good. Yes, it's harsh, but better than Borbas. The wisp of smoke nodded distinctly and flowed toward the boy's room. Mr. and Mrs. D sat on the couch. Morton's door flew open and slammed shut with a bang, as if caught in a monstrous draft. Morton looked up, frowned, and bent back over his books. The smoke took the form of a winged lion with a shark's tail. The beast roared menacingly, bared its fangs, and prepared to pounce. Morton glanced at it, raised his eyebrows, and began writing a column of numbers in his notebook. The lion transformed into a 3-headed lizard, reeking of blood. Breathing tongues of flame, it advanced on the boy. Morton finished his calculations, checked them on the abacus, and looked at the lizard. With a blood-curdling scream, the lizard turned into a giant bat, emitting shrill, incoherent sounds. It swooped around the boy's head, wailing. Morton smiled and returned to his books. Mr. D couldn't take it anymore. Damn it, he shouted. Aren't you scared? Why should I be? Morton asked, surprised. It's just Grandpa. The bat dissolved into thin air, and the resulting wisp of smoke gave Mr. D a sad nod, bowed to Mrs. D, and vanished. Goodbye, Grandpa, Morton called. Then he stood and closed his room's door. It's clear, Mr. D said. The boy's too damn confident. We'll have to call Borbas. No, his wife cried. Then what do you suggest? I don't know, Mrs. D said, nearly sobbing. But Borbas, children are never the same after meeting him. Mr. D was firm as stone. Still, there's no other way. He's so young, his wife pleaded. It's traumatic for a child. Well, we'll use every modern medical treatment, Mr. D said soothingly. We'll find the best psychoanalyst, spare no expense. The boy must be a sorcerer. Then start, Mrs. D said through her tears. But don't expect my help. All women are the same, Mr. D thought. When resolve is needed, they turn to mush. Steeling himself, he prepared to summon Borbas, the demon of children. First, he carefully drew a pentagram around a 12-pointed star, inscribed with an infinite spiral. Then came the herbs and extracts, expensive but essential. All that remained was to inscribe the protective spell to keep Borbas contained and add 3 drops of hippogriff blood. Where's my hippogriff blood? Mr. D asked irritably, rummaging through the cabinet. In the kitchen, in the old aspirin bottle, Mrs. D replied, wiping her tears. Everything was ready. Mr. D lit the black candles and spoke the words of unbinding. The room grew noticeably warmer, only the reading of the name remained. Morton, he called. Come here. The boy stepped out of his room, standing in the doorway, tightly clutching one of his accounting books. He looked so young and vulnerable. Morton, I'm about to summon the demon of children. Don't make me do this, Morton. The boy paled and pressed against the door but stubbornly shook his head. Very well, Mr. D said. Borbas. A deafening roar shook the room, a blast of heat flared, and Borbas appeared, his head brushing the ceiling. He grinned menacingly. "Aha!" the demon bellowed. "A little boy." Morton's jaw dropped, his eyes bulging. "A naughty little boy," Borbas cooed, chuckling as he stepped forward, the house shaking with each step. "Send him away," Mrs. D cried. "I can't," Mr. D said, his voice breaking. "Not until he's done his work." The demon's massive claws reached for Morton, but the boy quickly opened his book. "Save me," he cried. Instantly, a tall, gaunt old man appeared, covered head to toe in ink stains and accounting ledgers. His eyes were two empty zeros. "Zico Pico Ril," the demon howled, turning to the stranger. But the gaunt man laughed and said, "A contract with the higher powers can not only be challenged but annulled as invalid." The demon was hurled back, crashing into a chair. Borbas scrambled to his feet, his skin glowing red with fury, and recited the great demonic spell. "Vrat het ho," but the gaunt man shielded the boy and shouted the words of expulsion. Cancellation, expiration, prohibition, impotence, despair, and death. Borbas let out a pitiful squeal, stumbled back, groping for an escape in the air, and vanished. The gaunt man turned to Mr. and Mrs. D, cowering in the corner of the living room, and said, "Know that I am the accountant. Know also that this child has signed a contract with me, becoming my apprentice and servant. In turn, I, the accountant, pledge to teach him the curse of souls through the treacherous web of numbers, forms, claims, and repressions. Behold my mark." The accountant raised Morton's right hand, displaying an ink stain on his middle finger. Then he turned to the boy and said softly, "Tomorrow, little one, we'll start with tax evasion as a path to damnation." "Yes, sir." Morton beamed with enthusiasm. With a final stern glance at the D's, the accountant vanished. A long silence followed. Then Mr. D turned to his wife. "Well," he said, "if the boy wants to be an accountant so badly, I won't stand in his way."